which should be green.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to this evening's Committee of Adjustment meeting. Council of the Municipality of East Ferris is empowered this committee to make decisions on minor variance and consent separate applications on their behalf. The committee is made up of 5 citizen members and 2 members of council. Members of the committee are as follows.
I'm Terry Hanselman, I'm Deputy Clerk of the Municipality.
Mike Corbeil,
Sarah Misherville.
John Simmons,
Steve Austin.
Lauren Roy Akers on council.
and Greg Hartman with the municipality.
And Terry Kelly, I'm on council. Welcome everyone. As required under the Planning Act and pursuant to policy, the committee is holding a public meeting prior to making a decision on proposed applications. The Committee of Adjustment has not yet made any decisions on these matters, and all comments received prior to this evening's meeting, as well as comments received tonight during the meeting, will be considered in the decision. The committee makes our decisions based on the criteria outlined in the Planning Act that corresponds to the specific application type. The process will be as follows. 1, I will ask the applicant to present their application in the order listed on the agenda. The committee will ask any questions they have of the applicant. Staff will then provide their comments about the application and give an overview of correspondence that's been received. Members of the public will present and answer questions if needed. We will offer a 10-minute maximum time limit on all public comments to the committee. We will then move to a motion to approve or refuse the application. We'd ask that everyone be respectful in their presentations and comments should be related directly to the application. If any committee members have a conflict of interest in regards to any items on tonight's agenda, would they please declare it now? Hearing none, I'll continue. We'll now move to the first item on the agenda. Could I call the meeting to order, please?
Right, the mover and a seconder, please. Corbeil, Terra Misherville.
Everybody in agreement? And can I have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda, please? John, Steve? Everybody in agreement? Accepting the minutes of the previous meetings? A mover and a seconder, please? Or? All in favor? Any business arising from the minutes last meeting? Seeing none, I'll continue. Disclosure of any pecuniary interest in general nature thereof. Seeing none, we'll continue. The chair's comments. If I'm not mistaken, both parties that are present tonight were asked if they could resolve the differences and come to an amicable solution. And there was no success. Is that correct for both parties?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In that case, they were, as a committee, were being called upon to make a decision tonight. Ratepayers delegations would, my thoughts are, do you want to present anything? Has anything changed since the last time?
I don't believe I was here during the initial application, so I would appreciate a review on hearing the application.
Thank you, gentlemen. Give a short first.
I think if we're going to discuss, we should probably just jump right into the agenda items next. So,
Okay.
regular recognition delegations are requested. So, we didn't have any of this stuff.
Okay, so, are we in public hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. Sylvia LaPerriere and John Kennedy, 130 Parchment Drive. The applicants are requesting to close and purchase the road store allowance in front of 130 Parchment Drive, which is their address. Is that correct? Thank you. This application was previously before the committee, but was deferred to allow for consultations with the North Bay Meadow Conservation Authority and the abutting property owners, which is Mr. and Mrs.
The Norm Guppy.
Thank you very much. Correspondence and information, that's basically it, John, what Mr. and Mrs. Guppy live on South Shore Road. Kennedy is partner live on Archer Drive. So there's a road allowance in front of 130 Archer Drive. Mr. and Mrs. Guppy have been utilizing the road allowance to access the dock, which is in front of 130 Archer for a number of years. Okay. So the issue now is both parties, if I'm not mistaken, have asked Rick Story.
Right.
Okay, now both parties have requested to divide the road allowance, which is in front of 130 Harding.
Yeah, I was just gonna say for a point of order, since the formatting, the agenda follows our standard like application kind of review process, so we should be calling the applicant up to make his presentation to the committee. And then following that, we'll follow the same process to comment, and then we'll hear from any neighbor who speak to the applicant.
Try everybody to,
So I guess first, I would just on Sylvie's behalf apologize. She's volunteers with the North Bay Youth Volleyball Club and running a camp. So she could not attend tonight, but she wishes she could have. So I guess just for clarification from you guys, if I could, is because we did speak about it last time. So my presentation to the application, I think, is very, very straightforward, as in that we would like to purchase the road allowance as you had suggested in front of our property. There are a number of different issues that have arisen with challenges from the guppies. So I don't know if you would rather that, my application statement is pretty short. We would like to purchase the land. So, but there are a lot of other factors that have arisen since then. So I don't know if it makes sense. Like we have a few points of order, I guess, if you want to call it, that we would bring to attention, key points on our side, but I think, mention. Sure. And I just wanted to be clear, if it's the application, it's very simple on our end.
Yeah.
It's the, the issues that have arisen since, so I can address those if that's fair to everybody. Yeah. Okay. So our key points, as you know, and this is all documented and emailed back and forth through Greg, and he was, as of last meeting, mediating the emails between the guppies and us, because last time we didn't have any correspondence. We reached out and hadn't gotten anywhere in that respect. To my knowledge, we haven't had any mediation or any response from the guppies since the last meeting. So that's why there are no headway. We haven't been able to come to an agreement, just due to lack of conversation. So our key points would be that, and this, we put this in our all the emails to Greg, which I'm sure he has copies of, but I have as well if you guys need it. When we got home after the last meeting, we checked our purchase agreement for the property at 130 Carter. And so in our chattels, we do own the dock. So that was something that is new from last meeting, because it was asked, who owns the dock? And we honestly were not prepared to have a discussion about, different things. We were literally here just to say we've formally applied to purchase the land. So the dock does belong to 130 Carter Road. And so it was an inaccurate depiction in the minutes from the last meeting as well, because that was, obviously written down that we did not own the dock. So we would just like to make sure that that is known. Second point would be Greg Curtin's comments from the North Bay Manawha Conservation Authority. So we were supposed to contact them, and we've also spoken to them in person just because of my line of work. I tend to see Valerie quite often. So this is also documented that according to the NBMCA, the guppies or whoever resides at that property can build a dock and would be given permission to do so, and can dredge and clear. There's I believe it's a 13-foot or 4-meter access corridor that is allowed to be cleared on anyone's property to access their lake. So that was one of the stipulations last time, so that can be partaken by them. The neighbors to the west of the guppies, as you can see from the site plans here, that they actually have less waterfront, and they have gone ahead and done the things they needed to do to get to the lake and have access. So very like properties as far as topography and swamp, or not swamp, but wetland, swampland area that everybody calls that end of the lake, with the creek there. So that's just shows what can be done in that situation. And the fourth one would be that we, as I had previously said, that we had we tried to come to a solution, and we have not received any correspondence from them. So basically here again tonight, not really feeling ready further ahead than where we were before, but not by, lack of effort on our part. So, we have some facts as well, but I think it makes a lot of sense that, the Guppies wish to speak, they can talk about what, their side of it is, because I think that's fair, or any other questions from you guys.
Any questions for me?
At this time.
Pretty straightforward.
Good now.
Just have one question about the dock. The last meeting, I recall that the dock was there before part 130 Barchester was built.
Before the house was built?
Yeah,
Yes, that's correct. So when we purchased the property, it was vacant land. And we cleared the land, built the house, and the dock was there at the time of our purchase of the property. And that's why it's in our chattels, with the agreement to purchase the property, that the dock is part of that property.
so the person who owned that land beforehand built that dock.
That's correct.
Okay, so
Yeah, so the person who owned, I believe it's 73, is that's correct? Yeah, so 73 South Shore was actually Sylvie's uncle, and so they owned both of those properties. So he bought 73 and bought Partner, so he had a clear or a forested bush area. So he built his house on 73 and then built the dock in front of 130. And then when that was sold by Sylvie's aunt, I believe it was up for option to buy both properties and it wasn't bought. And I don't know if that was the Guppies or somebody previous to them, but so we purchased that extra vacant lot
with the dock.
from Sylvie's aunt soon, about 10 years later. And so that dock's been there, I think 30 years.
Yeah.
It probably has about one more year in it. It's almost underwater now. So.
Any further questions? Is that straight things out for you?
Yeah.
Okay, John, you're good with it? Thank you. Mark?
Well, I guess you put in something else into this application, which was the proposed lot layout. And I went by today and there was I had pictures of the rope.
Yes.
From a tree to a stake just past the dock. And is that different from what you're asking, or I just want you to clarify?
Yes.
Proposed versus the original.
Of course.
Application.
Yes, so when you look at the lot, like in the key map here, so my assumption when I purchased the land was that, and I didn't know anything, I'm just telling you my straight up assumption is that most property lines, if you were to buy the shore allowance, kind of go straight along your property line and goes towards the lot. I'm sure in most cases that's true. So I was under the assumption that if we were to purchase that further down the road, that would be approximately where the lot line would be. So that's what I assumed when we had spoken with the Guppies and Greg. I think it's a year and a half ago, at least. And so Greg was there, met with us and said, if you guys could come to an agreement between the two of you where a lot line could go, that would make the process very simple. We sign off on that, we sever it. Or not separate, it might not be the right term, but divide it that way, we could go forward. So at that time, we had discussed, the Guppies and myself and Sylvie, and came up with a general idea of where we wanted to put it. We made plans, made designs, we staked that out at that point. And then we did not receive any more feedback back from them after that line was proposed. And then that brought us to saying, okay, email 1, 2, 3, not hearing back from them, phone call, nothing. So let's just go ahead and apply because it's the only way we're going to get something to happen. So that's where that was. And then so after last meeting, we spoke and said, okay, we need to come up with an agreement between the two of us. There were still no communications. So I took it upon myself to go down and kind of restate that line and say, this is what we propose. And just so that you guys know as well, our lot is 100 feet wide where we own. So if I were to assume that it's about 100 feet at the lake, what I tried to do was come up with a concession and say, well, let's take 75 feet so that there's still some access and all that sort of thing. So that was my, here's my offer. Let's talk about it and see where we get. And again, there was no communication. So that's what you saw today was I left those in and took pictures again to say, well, this is what I was starting the communication with, and we haven't gotten anywhere. So to be honest, I mean, if there was no issue, I would hope we had more property than that, but that was where I was willing to say, well, what can we do to compromise here?
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mrs. Guppy, would you like to come forward? Evening.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak for. First question I had though is Greg, just to make sure that you can confirm that you received our application as well.
Yes, so that's something that was going to.
Does that require another meeting?
Yes, maybe this is a good time. I'll have to jump in for a second, if you don't mind. This is something I was going to add. So on the 15th, so 2 days ago, we also received an application to purchase shoreline road allowance from the Guppies for their property. I think this is a good time to talk about where the lot line would be drawn. There's been a lot of conversation that if these were approved, it may be in one of the ways that the two people are requesting. It's quite obvious to me that we're at a point where there's not going to be an agreement. So I think that the only way a lot line would ever get drawn in this is just default into our bylaw standard, which says perpendicular to shoreline. There's ways that surveys can figure that out. Unsurprisingly, both the applications show vastly different interpretations of where they think that lot line should go. So I think that it's important that we just clearly say that any future approval for either of these applications, I think we need to be very strictly determined by the municipality, which regards to where the lot line went. There's ways you can do that. I mean, you can take deposits from each of the parties, and then the municipality can commission the survey work so that there's not undue influence of where the lot line may go, etc. But I don't think we should really be talking about whose request for lot line is going to be relevant, because I think the only way this lot line gets determined is by the clear hard line that the bylaw says. But that being said, we have received an application from the Guppies. It came in 2 days ago. We're required to circulate those at least 10 days before, based on our sale of road allowance bylaw. So it's up to the committee right now if you want to hear both applications together, which may be possible at tonight's meeting, or if you'd like to make a decision on one application, just under that understanding of how lot lines would be determined, and deal with the Guppies application at a future meeting. But those are kind of the two options, and I think that the kind of administrative framework for how the law line has to be determined if these go forward.
Any questions, Greg?
So you're saying that a survey would have to be done and the municipality determines. So are you the municipality?
Well, yeah, so this is where council will have to kind of decide how they want to do it. But a survey always has to be done before you can do the sale. But the difficulty right now is no one can agree on where the lot line should be drawn, because we can't clearly define exactly where the shoreline is relative to the peg, relative to where the lot line would be drawn. So when we've had serious disagreements about property disputes in the past, the way the municipality has done it is because imagine a scenario where both applications say go forward and they both hire a surveyor to do the work. It's maybe not the most unbiased process for a surveyor hired by either person to go through that process of trying to delineate it. So we've had situations where the municipality isn't going to do the survey work up front. Because then if the lot line is not favorable to one of the parties to what they see it should be, then they drop their application and then the municipality's up the money, right? So the way that these things have to be structured, but this is kind of more of a council decision, to be honest. But we've taken deposits from multiple parties in the past. We've commissioned the work, and then we're not out the money, but it's obviously a potential risk for either party. But yeah, I mean, I think the only way we can do this is clearly defining this, the shoreline tree survey, and then determining where that perpendicular line is, and that's where it is, so.
If you have to the shoreline.
Yeah.
For your clarification, have you offered, are you putting an offer in on the shore lots in front of your house?
Yes.
Or part of the one
In front of 73 South Shore.
from 173,
Yes.
not in front of 135 Archer.
No, we haven't, no. We've never even been on Parcher. We don't use that road. Never did.
Okay, any other questions? Frank, you have a question?
Oh, I'm just trying to put it all together here.
Yeah, I do, because we typically know approximated lot lines. And so I'm confused, and sorry, but what is the complication if they want to purchase in front of their place and they want to purchase in front of their place aside from the dock question?
So just the way the properties are oriented and the way they kind of been used, there's.
Great, like that?
One thing that I did use, I pulled some old aerial imagery and I've got a copy for everyone, including the two applicants. So this shows approximate lot lines at the 2011 and 2021 imagery. So it goes back to before 130 Parker was built. That's down this way, and it gives you kind of an idea of how the properties have been used historically and where the dock is relative to.
So this is 141.
You can pass two more things on if you don't mind.
Oh, they're 10 years apart. Sorry, yeah, they're 10 years apart.
Oh, sorry, there's two, everyone's got two kids. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. So if you go 33 feet out from the high water mark, then
But this is,
you're crisscrossing the problem.
and this is what I see the problem was. Trying to, the dock's out. Got nothing to do with it now.
Okay,
So this one would go straight, would be perpendicular to the. This one would be perpendicular. Shoreline, so here's,
so they cross over.
well, because it's the shoreline, they're not a continuation of the property line.
Yeah,
So it would go that angle.
Yeah.
90 degrees to that, it goes straight out there.
Yeah.
And so on there. But now you see, obviously this house wasn't built.
right.
Because this is the end of part of it. All these.
Yeah.
Things finishes here.
Yeah.
So this is. Sort of one down.
So if he extends, if it goes there, then basically they intersect.
So one,
So that's,
one is elevated. Parker's elevated. One in South Shore is non-elevated, it's elevated to an extent, but a different elevation.
oh yeah, that's.
Parker is almost like a cliff looking, and if the lot lines are straight down, there's where your overall runs along the shore. It doesn't take into consideration the elevation of one, and they're both elevated, but one's lower than higher than the other.
May I offer a couple of comments on what I see in the images? If I look at the 2011 imagery, that clearly shows where the corner post is, the golden corner post for both properties.
Yeah.
Charger and 73, which is the guppy. But if you look at the 2021 imagery, you see that little white square that's before. That's not really in the right place relative to the corner post. I don't ever recall that being behind the property.
Yeah, so I should say that these are approximate, as I said, I think they're for illustration purposes only, and we need a survey to.
Oh, okay, understood.
Yeah, it's hard because when we get the aerial imagery, it's there's lot lines overlaid on it, and it's all taken from like five.
Oh, okay.
It's not on surveys.
So someone else has drawn in the property lines?
It's overlaid on them, so we take the MPAT property lines and then try to match it to the imagery, so it's not perfect. But the bigger point of this was just to show the layout before 130 Parker was built, and so I mean, it looks to me like the dock was associated with the 73 South Shore property originally. So I mean, I understand that it says in the sale agreement that it belongs to 130 Parker, but but I mean. It seems difficult to say that it belongs to a property that didn't have a building on it beforehand. But I mean, I don't think that's the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue is deciding where the law line goes. And if we're, municipalities willing to sell, but this was more just to give a little bit of additional background to both applicants and the committee.
If I could quickly just, I completely agree that, so the property line pin, the original one is actually still there in that corner. And so like he's referring to, it's definitely not in the right place. So even when we had to get a survey to build our house, our house had, I think the setback is 10 feet. And so you can see in this corner here where our house is built now, that that's not 10 feet. So it's obvious, it is quite a bit further onto the 1/3 side. So, I agree. The only other thing quickly was that, I was under the assumption that I think Don has quite an experience with realty, that, something that's in chattels is fairly binding, I think, as far as something belonging to a property. And I think that's where Sylvia and I were frustrated last time, that we kind of got into a conversation about a dock. And like the dock isn't worth anything. It's really like we came to apply to buy property, which then they want to do as well. So I think the dock is, it's a nothing thing because it's actually dangerous.
The one thing I will add for the community's benefit about the dock is the North Carolina Conservation Authority. They're the ones who issue dock permits on Lake Constantine, and they have no record of any dock permit being issued for either of these properties. So this dock was built without a permit and has no legal kind of record anyways. So I think it's really difficult to get into any kind of a meaningful conversation at this level.
Yep.
If there was a serious dispute over the dock, I think that the two neighbors would have to settle that in court rather than here. But I don't think it's a conversation we can really answer with a student.
If I might just add to that, we have already jointly agreed, both parties, that the dock is fine to be shared. I mean, we didn't have any issue with it, and I think we talked about that in the last meeting. Well, we're happy to share the dock as long as we can maintain access to it.
Dock has nothing to do with the property.
Yeah.
Really not when we got on that tangent last time talking about it, Sylvia actually brought it up. She's really like the dock is tough. Like it really has nothing to do with properties. Like you said before, anybody can build a dock 100 years ago. It doesn't mean anything, right?
I'm not surprised there's no record of the dock.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody in my neighborhood have ever got a permit for a dock.
No, that's,
Unless are attachment to the shoreline, we were affecting the shoreline.
I don't think it's very fine.
and so really we have one active application from us. That's what we can speak to. Everyone wants to buy as they should.
The companies have applied, yes.
They have now applied, but that's not the one in front of us. So we, in fact, support the purchase of Lakeshore Road allowances. It's not up to us as a committee, as you said, to determine what that marker is for it. That's up to others to figure it out.
Yes, the major difficulty with this one, I'll clarify, and if any members have a different interpretation, then feel free to chime in, but the immediate major issue with this one, I had the opportunity that you were at was, depending on where the lot line gets drawn, the westerly portion, if you look at the shoreline all in front of both properties, the westerly portion is very shallow and weedy and less suitable to enter future kind of development. So I think there's some uncertainty about where that should go and as far as maintaining access, and to me that seems to be the fundamental issue. But I know the companies that have been waiting to their
Yeah, sorry. Jump ahead.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate all the discussion because this helps further clarify what we were proposing originally, and we had submitted documentation previous to the first meeting that showed that we had interpreted, and it's as per the discussion that you had, Greg, when the Kennedys asked the question, how is it normally determined? And you responded that it was from the corner post in question, perpendicular to the shoreline, straight line. not a zigzag line, not, you know, not incredible. It's just a straight line from the peg perpendicular to the shoreline.
Yes.
That's the way we're still interpreting it. And the only reference that I make to the dock is we had all thought that from the corner post to the edge of the dock, that was where the line was likely to be drawn
Gotcha.
to the left edge of the dock that you can still see in the picture. So that's what we had heard and that's what we documented, and that's how when we resubmitted a portion of in our application of the documents that we had originally provided in the previous meeting. So just wanted to make sure that was clear, because we were happy. Well, I was happy to hear that it was a straight line from the corner post perpendicular to the shoreline. So I'm going to go on. I'm sorry if I have to read a little bit, but I made copies for everyone, just in case I skip a paragraph or a point. The most important thing here is to make sure that everybody understands that it was clarified in the last meeting how the concept of the existing policies for corner post to shoreline, how they're normally laid out. And I don't want this to be a contentious point, but I want to point out that I don't recall, and I asked Kathy even while we were listening, the Kennedys have never approached us since the last meeting to have more meetings, to go down and walk around down there. So this was a surprise to Kathy and I when we saw the new submission that Sophie provided to Greg, that it looked considerably different to earlier discussions that we had. I didn't know anything about a 21-foot variance from the corner post to continue going along the Harbinger alignment. I didn't know anything about that 21 feet. I just didn't know. I thought it was going to be a straight line straight to the corner where the dock is. So in my mind, I think that what the Kennedys are proposing actually circumvents what I understand to be the standard policy. And what bothers me is, and I'm trying to be subjective here, what bothers me is it appears that there is an advantage to the Kennedys in the way it's being proposed by them, which in turn becomes a difficult for us because it's a compromise to the property that we expected we would be entitled to with our application. The dock, I don't even need to talk about the dock, because if we need to build a new dock, I'm sure we'll get together and build a new dock and wherever it works. And I think what probably caught me, and I sent you an email, Greg, saying, has Sophie responded to where the dock is in her submission? I still haven't seen anything. I don't know where the dock is in her present submission. I have a feeling that it's significantly now further to the west of the dock where it meets the waterfront. But I can't tell because we don't know. Like, we haven't seen anybody draw in where the dock is with respect to their most recent proposal. So, you know, in summary now, I guess I just want to say that Kathy and I are definitely not in favor of deviating from the standard policy if it's to benefit of one party, but not to the benefit of the other. Kathy, do you have anything to add?
I think the thing that I find most difficult is the fact that if I'm looking, my house is here, their property is here, and if they go with the lot line going out this way, as opposed to here's the peg and it goes this way, there's a canoe down there, there are boulders all over the place, there's a fish shack that is now in that area, it's not on our property, but it's in that short allowance. I'm looking at it. That's what I see. I don't see my water. So if their property comes along and goes from the pay towards the west, right, towards the west, then they have the opportunity to build anything they want. They can put pull their fish hat wherever they want. I would like a waterfront to look at water. And our property is almost 200 feet of shoreline. So if theirs comes across, what does that mean then? That my property goes over across the stream to get my almost 200 feet. You know what I mean? What I don't want to see is things in front of my windows so that I'm looking at, I might as well bought in town. Because now I'm looking at a building. I'm not looking at water. And to the side, to the one side is the stream where spawning happens. We're trying to keep that all preserved. So if every time, if that happens, every time property moves this way, now I'm in, what am I going to build on the stream? Put my dock there. Where the spawning happens. I don't think that's really what that property was intended for. I mean, I think that the fish hatch should go on their side. And I'm sorry, what's the issue I'm having is, go on, look at your fish hatch.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue for me.
Sorry, Rob.
I have only one last comment. Kathy and I looked at our purchase agreement for the property as well. And there's no question. I mean, Hardinger was bush. So there's no question that the dock was for 73 South Shore Road. And I looked at our documentation to make sure that I didn't see that there was any particular exception identified in the documentation to say that's not our dock, that it's not part of the agreement. There's nothing documented. So I can't speak to their bill of sale. I just can't. So there's a little bit of an issue there. I think that we need to, maybe we can try to get to the bottom of it.
Anybody have any questions?
I'm wondering, sorry, if I could add one more thing.
Sure.
I'm wondering, since it's the property side by side, rather than say, yeah, go ahead, you're going to do something, could we wait and have the decision with survey and the decision of the tagline and where it goes at the same time, rather than have the one and then wait for the other?
I think logistically it's difficult, but it is possible. And this is what I kind of took. This is the situation I tried to kind of preempt earlier. This whole idea of the law line going perpendicular, that's what our bylaw says. But the issue is when you start looking at the map, and I'm sure you can all look at these air photos of this thing. And if we were all to draw a line, it would probably all be slightly different. And we think it would be perpendicular because it's not so it's easy when you're dealing with geometric shapes, but when you're dealing with an uneven shoreline that changes over time that has different vegetation, different whatever. It's not so easy to just point to that spot and say definitively this is where a perpendicular line goes. So yes, a survey would greatly help that because a survey would be able to plot the shoreline accurately, and then there's things you can do in CAD such as figure out, like all the points on the shoreline can be averaged to create an angle that's more manageable, and then you have a point that you can point to and say, yes, this is the perpendicular point. And that's what would have to be done through the purchase process if approved by council. To actually do that, I mean, if we could waive a decision for both, I mean, fundamentally they both have, it's one to buy the shoreline from them. And they agreed in principle to the fact that, yes, this lot line will go perpendicular to the shoreline as per the bylaw says, then there should be no. That's it. So there should be no disagreement there, but it's just that getting that survey done, are we going to have both the applicants kind of pre-K together for the survey and we administer it and ask them for it? You know, this is where I was trying to say it's not so easy to figure out exactly where it is or to just give the approvals and let them run with it because you know, you could end up with different results, and then if a municipality goes ahead and does it, there's a big upfront cost to that. So, I mean, ultimately, if both applicants want to purchase their shorelines, which it appears that they do, and we say, and they know that the bylaw will be interpreted in this way. I mean, the applications can go forward to council, and council can approve them in principle. But I guess just there's got to be this understanding that there's probably another conversation to be had about how the survey work gets administered.
So right now we're looking at the application from Kennedy's to buy their road short lots, which we have precedents, we've decided that. Yes. I personally am prepared to go forward with them being able to buy those short lots. And then the next meeting we'll probably be looking at the other application. So pretty okay with
The
the
next meeting with what?
the Mrs. Guthrie will line to buy in front of their house. Where the actual lines are, can I extrapolate the lines here on the 2021 and 11. And the one line from Henry's property is going to cut right across. And the other line will go on the other side will be Mrs. Guthie's property. They'll still have access. But the access will be west of where they're getting access now. So that's because a lot of lines run in straight lines as far as the border.
They're not.
That's why coming down.
It doesn't extend.
Exactly. So that's not up to us to decide. We're allowing, in my opinion, we could vote on.
Could we, if in principle, could we put a recommendation in there that we adhere to the bylaw perpendicular to the shoreline?
You could if you want to reinforce the points.
Yeah, because that way with the bylaw is then being put into effect. And is mandated that they have to follow it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
So, and I guess I'm kind of confused that we don't kind of have clarity on this, how this works. Or maybe you do, and I just don't, sorry. So I don't mean to imply that. When I look at 70 Hardinger and 68, 60, looks like they bought and merged their Lakeshore Road around the song title, right? It extends out into it anyways. By the appearance of the document that I see in the application.
Can you repeat that, John?
Like 70, it's on the, just on this,
Sorry, going on that, eh?
yeah, on this map. So, like lot 70, 68. It's a continuation of the direction of the lot line at that pin.
So the way our bylaw is written is that it will go from N to a line that's perpendicular to the shoreline. So it'll get shoreline at a 90-degree angle, but the difficulty is figuring out how that you guys know the shorelines and moving in and out. It makes it more difficult than it seems that base value that can be drawn properly. Okay. The real difficulty with this one is that the both houses are oriented in a way that they're facing towards the same space. That's really the difficulty.
So we can vote on this. Vote on the other one separately, and surveys have to happen anyways.
Yeah, they do before anything can be transferred. Yeah, it's up to the county. I'd say that it's probably like if there's two applications that have an impact on each other, it's probably best practice to generally deal with it together. So in a normal circumstance, I might recommend that this be deferred to be dealt with the next application. I know we've already deferred once, but that being said, there's no way that the lot line is going to be drawn any differently, regardless of what the outcome of the Guppy's application next week is.
Right.
So you really could go ahead with this one. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna share the same lot line, it can only be drawn in one way as per our bylaw goes. And then it's gonna be a technical exercise on the surveyor's end to figure out exactly how that looked, which is maybe difficult, but we'll have to figure that out.
Everybody okay with that? Right, you get it?
I just have one question, and I should have looked it up.
Okay.
The definition of shoreline, I guess depending on who you're talking to or what context it's in. It's gonna be high water line, it could be where the first cattail is. So that could really affect where perpendicular is. This map, so is that something they will define when surveyors are not?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why it's difficult to do. A lot of variability in the interpretation. Our bylaw doesn't clearly lay out what the exact definition is. There's surveying standards that we usually rely on for those type of things, but yeah, it's not so clear cut.
Almost, in my opinion, it's almost like a corner lot on a property. Because what you've got the place on Parker facing in northwesterly direction.
Yeah.
You've got the south shore property, it's actually facing northwest. I'm sorry, northwest. Parker is northwest and property on the south shore is actually northeast. More than northerly direction, all stretching north. They're looking at the same, problem is the lake, the lot lines don't follow the contours of the lake. Because that's a little bay there. And then there's a stream, then we go over towards, the property, the big hotel hill. And then move stop and inside of that. So that is, but quite frankly, I'm okay with voting on the one application. And then when the other one comes, then they're gonna have to get together, quite frankly, and get the surveys in and see where everything goes. Is everybody comfortable with that?
I do have one other question then.
Sure.
If that's the case and you approve what they are wanting to buy. Because the survey has to be done for exactly where the land is in question for each side. Then nobody can start building or doing updating to that until that lot line has been decided, correct?
We don't issue building permits for structures that are on lands just known.
So what I'm saying is neither one of us, even though we both want to purchase the land, either one of us can go ahead and start doing things to that until.
Because you don't know.
Right, okay,
Until the transfer takes place.
yes.
Line transfer.
May I offer a clarification here, Dustin? I'm looking at our own survey that we received as part of when we made our purchase. It has a statement in here that says 66 feet from normal ordinary water's edge. So I guess it's not high water or low water, or if there's any fluctuations in the level. And we can figure that out fairly quick if we just go to the corner peg that we've already got and measure it to the shore and see if it is 66 feet or so. I mean, if we find that there's a 20-foot discrepancy, well, then there's either something wrong with the peg or the shoreline has changed.
Well, and that's the thing, so depending on the age of the survey, shoreline could have completely changed.
Yeah.
And so if they're gonna do it based on current, maybe taking that into consideration as a guideline.
Yes.
But yeah, if they're gonna do current, it'd be interesting to see where it ends up.
And I would just offer one comment, please, to everyone. We would like, first of all, just to get a copy of what the standard policy is so that we are clearly understanding what it is. But whatever that policy is, we're in accordance with the policy as long as we follow the policy.
You don't think? Want to ask a question? So, I completely agree with everything you guys are saying about we have to wait, you have to know, of course, we can't build anything. I completely understand that. Where, or is there any protection for either one of us? If that line that's decided by a surveyor, and I assume that you guys will do that. So let's say it is about these 15 feet of water. Because that's a perpendicular line. Let's say it gives us 15 feet of water. Like, is there any minimum here? Because I know that there's minimum standards for, you know, how to build things, and of course, I'm honestly concerned about like big last things. It can really affect someone's property. Right, so like, it's no joke anymore that, you know, these are $1 million houses on the lake now. So like, if this hampers one of us from selling because we now don't have water access, like, and that's where we came from the first one, said like, unfortunately, their house was built facing 2 lots. You know, our house faces down perpendicular to our lot. So we said instantly, I understand why, you know, everybody has different ideas, but like, you can always look out your window and see something you don't like on a neighbor's property. That's just unfortunate, right? So, but you know, depending on where the line goes, maybe I don't want to buy it. If I get 10 feet, then what's the point of me buying it, right? Because I can't do anything with it, you know, other than walk down and go. I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's no minimums listed, so I mean, ultimately, if both are approved and we're going through exercise saying both of you have the right to buy based on outcome, it is potentially a risk. Unless council wants to build in something safeguard the approval that I mean, then they're looking at rewriting their bylaw on the spot though for a one-off, which is not ideal.
No.
But they have until they have full approval, which wouldn't be till after the survey is completed.
So the process for approval is that the approval in principle and then like directions to the survey work are given. You can't do the final transfer till after the survey work because you rely on the survey work to define the part that's being transferred. And then that also determines the cost because then you know the area and everything. So a bylaw always has to go back to council before any transfer can take place. So it would return to council after the survey work was done. So there is, I guess, another opportunity for discussion with council if there's an issue. But there really isn't any safeguard like pre-built into the process.
So they could not extract or withdraw their application.
Well, I mean, they could, one party could, but then the other party still has an active application by along that line on their side, right? So it's really helpful.
The other one can buy their own, whatever the determination is. If one side says it's not worth it for me to buy it, then they can withdraw.
I guess what I'm saying is you have two, the law lines may be somewhere, and if one side decides based on the law line, it's not worth it for me to buy that, that's fine, but the lot line is still there for the other person's property, so it's still limiting your property in a negative way. So it's better, even if you buy it or not.
Yeah.
Potentially.
So, and I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just about to say, so it comes down to the point, the two of you working out what's best for both of you.
Yeah.
Point is.
And that was what I was gonna ask, because I mean, on my side, that's what we have been trying to do. So when, you know, you mentioned that they hadn't received any of that information, that's disheartening to me, because I was asked to do work and I submitted it, and then now we're still in the same place.
So there were a series of emails, and I had sent you one too, Mr. Guppy, and I don't know if maybe I had asked him to check your junk email box at the time, and I'm not sure if you were able to. But you were copied on a series of emails that started from April 24th to about May 8th.
So I understand that those the joint, I'm gonna call them joint correspondence back and forth.
Yeah.
Through you know, CCs. The only one that I didn't see was where you had sent Sophie an email saying, can you show where what you're proposing is with respect to relative to the dock? That's what I was hoping we were gonna know. And then I would have an idea if, you know, if the dock was in a right place where we can both share it.
I could pull it up on here.
And Sophie is Sylvie.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, I'm just wondering if I had another person.
if you were here, I would have heard your name again and I would have been.
Okay. Oh, I just wanted to make sure I didn't have a.
It would be a third party.
And I will just show you very quickly, I sent this email, this is.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't see that one either. So that's,
Thanks for the question.
all right. It's clearly know where they belong. I mean, the way it's projected here is clearly not. What is it? Okay, thank you.
Application. Do we then still have to get a survey?
You always see a survey because it's not possible to get your property that isn't defined in some way on a survey.
The survey would just make that spot.
They would just make that a spot, yeah. So,
But would the surveyor have to be going under the perpendicular rules? Whereas if you pick the point, the surveyor can go to that point. And
that's
make that
exactly,
point.
that's.
And then you're both safeguarded from what you agree on. It's done.
My only comment is if it follows the existing policy, we're going to agree and accept the survey as, you know,
The
drawn out.
point of the other chat, sorry, Mr. Kennedy's point was it could go your way or it could go his way.
That's right.
Yeah,
But by you two agreeing a point, then you're both satisfied.
we haven't been able to get to that because right now, if it goes anywhere further away, the edge of the dock, on the west side of the dock, we're into the swamp.
And that's nowhere near. That's not satisfactory for you, west of the dock.
No, so we had stated last time, so if it is at the west end of the dock, then our whole purpose, purchasing the road out, shoreline, sorry, was that we would like to build a boathouse. And you would need a certain amount of setback. So if that was the case, we have about 40 feet of lake access. And I believe it's 13 or 14 feet from either property line before you can purchase something or build something. So it just didn't allow enough room for us to do anything. So then, you know, there's no point in this.
Quite frankly, we won't know until there's a survey.
Correct, yeah.
So they're good.
Well, ready to go? Bring.
I mean, I guess the question should be, based on how Greg answered your question, John, would you prefer to defer until we've had both applications? And then have a survey done, and then you can choose to move forward or not,
Yeah.
but at your cost.
Yeah,
I mean, that's.
what I would say, just, I guess the question was, you spent $1,000 to submit. So that funding is like, that money's gone, right?
Yeah.
We applied, so it bears nothing on me when. How you guys decide, because we need to know the property.
That's good. You want to get this done?
I think so, yeah. You have an application, and yeah, there's no reason. Yep.
Then, as the survey comes out, and find out who's,
Yep.
where the lot lines actually are. Is that fair? Okay. Right,
Quick question, who's responsible for the survey?
the parties that own the property that want to buy the shoreline.
No, we don't have, we can both back out,
Oh,
yeah. But you know, we both already spent $1,000.
yeah, yeah.
So.
Okay, both parties.
And we're responsible for the survey. Do you know the cost for a survey?
It depends on the use, depends on the complexity. It's not a huge area.
No.
I would expect it's $3,000 to $6,000 range. That, I mean, yeah, if you're doing them both like it all together, which you should, it'll be cheaper. Otherwise, you're probably looking at that cost each, whereas together, you're probably going to be splitting maybe $6,000
So now do you pay and we pay you?
Well, so that's the difficulty I was talking about earlier, because if someone backs out, then it's difficult to recoup money. In a normal circumstance where there's no potential disagreement, we would just give someone suggestions to just wait a survey, and then we'd accept the plan afterwards. In this case, we may need to do some type of agreement where we provide the survey directions to a surveyor that you both agree on, or something like that. And then advise you both to be responsible for the costs, or we take an initial deposit from both parties and then do it. Something like that will have to be worked out, and that's something that council will.
How quickly does that part need to happen?
There's no real rush on any of this happening. Once the approval in principle is done, they don't really expire. They haven't passed. But I think it would be best to not just drag on. I think once we start, we should probably try to resolve it as the surveyors are able to do work.
I'm quite prepared to do 50% of whatever that value is.
And give it to the municipality? If you count it.
We'll take it on the next meeting, because I think that's when the application will be coming up.
Okay.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Like we have.
Yeah, you have to do survey.
But pay your money now, we take our chances. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get this done tonight if we can, and then we'll deal with the next one as it comes up. Eric, could you help me?
Oh, yeah, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Lauren and Joe. I'm just gonna read the motion and put it on. Whereas a request has been made by Sylvia LaPierre and John Kennedy to close and purchase the original shoreline overlap study on 3 Parker Drive. And whereas round number 2015-35 provides policies and procedures for the disposition of shoreline road allowances in the municipality of East Ferris. And whereas the request would comply with the policy set out in round number 2015-35. Therefore, be it resolved that the request made by Sylvia LaPierre and John Kennedy to close and purchase the original shoreline road allowance abutting 130 Partridge Drive be recommended to proceed in accordance with applicable regulations, policies, and procedures set out in bylaw number 2015-30.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rick. Anything further, let's correspondence information items. Don't need for the camera. So we could have a moving second for adjournment, please. Thank you, Lauren.
Planning Advisory Committee meeting adjourned at 7:30.